this lesson, we're going to go over Unit 11 of Khan Academy's SAT Reading Prep. So let's start with subject-verb agreement. And we'll also be taking notes along the way. So subject-verb agreement just requires that the subject and verb have to agree in numbers. So for example, if you have apples is different from oranges, this is incorrect because is for singular, right? If apples is plural, then you need to use the word are. Apples are different from oranges. So just make sure that plural subjects are paired with the plural form of the verb, and single subjects are paired with the single form of the verb. And the same logic must be applied to all subject-verb pairings. So how to identify subject-verb agreement questions? When approaching form, structure, and sense questions, it's important to identify which standard English conventions are being tested. You'll know to look for subject-verb agreement errors if different choices contain singular and plural forms of the same verb. If you don't see this difference among the choices, then the question doesn't deal with a subject-verb agreement. Let's look at an example. When a fire burns red or green or blue, the color of its flames blanks the chemical composition of the combustible material. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? So you can see that we have different forms of the same verb, so this is probably testing subject-verb agreement. And if we look at the sentence again, it says when a fire burns red or green or blue, the color of its flames. So this is a singular thing, right? It's a fire, its flames, it's one thing. So we're probably looking for a verb that works with a single subject, and that's going to be indicates. So the color of its flames indicates the chemical composition. So that verb is going to agree with its subject. What can make subject-verb agreement errors difficult to spot? When a verb follows directly after a subject, agreement is pretty easy to verify. So in the previous example where we had apples is different from oranges versus apples are different from oranges, it's pretty easy to tell the difference. However, when a sentence structure becomes more complex, subject-verb agreements can become much harder to spot. So sometimes you'll have extra words between the subject and the verb. When additional words, especially other nouns, come between a subject and a verb, agreement errors are much easier to miss. So for example, notice how we have this sentence. It says, Istanbul, the most populous of all European cities, were founded in the first millennium BCE. So notice how this part here, this is extra information, right? Istanbul is the subject, and were founded, I guess, is the verb in this case, right? This is extra information in between the subject and the verb. So because of that, it makes it a little more difficult to spot the differences in agreement, right? This would be the correct form of the sentence. Istanbul, the most populous of all European cities, was founded in the first millennium BCE. So you can see from this explanation, while the plural noun cities is close to the verb, it's not the subject of the verb. The phrase the most populous of all European cities is describing the singular noun Istanbul, which is the subject of the verb. So this explanation is just saying that this is the subject, this is some stuff referring or describing the subject, this is the actual verb. So one thing that you can do to help if you're having this issue where there's extra information, to make it more simple, just eliminate all the extra information between the subject and the verb. So let's say that we have this sentence and we know that this is our subject and this is our verb, but we have this extra information in the middle. We can just get rid of this because again, this is describing the noun, but it's not relevant it's not necessary information to the sentence. We can still keep the sentence even without this extra information. So one thing that you'll notice in sentences is that extra information can come in the middle of sentence using commas. So notice how this extra information is separated by commas. Extra information can also be separated by dashes, so like this. So 2 dashes, Istanbul, the most populous of all European cities, was founded in the first millennium. So we can introduce that information using dashes, or we can have parentheses. Or again, back to commas, like the original case. So whenever you have extra information in a sentence, it's going to be split up. It's going to be injected using two commas or two dashes or two parentheses. And usually, when you have a situation like that, that is going to be extra information, and your sentence doesn't actually need it. And we'll get more to that later. But the point is that we can actually eliminate this information entirely and just read the sentence like this: Istanbul was founded in the first millennium. So we know that that's incorrect. Now there's no information, extra information. It's easier to see that this is the incorrect tense, right? So Istanbul, or sorry, this is the correct tense. The incorrect tense was were founded. So if we had something like this, then Istanbul were founded in the first millennium, that would be incorrect, but was founded is actually correct. So again, once we eliminate that extra information, it becomes easier to tell um, the subject and verb. Okay, let's go back to this article. Inverted sentences. Sometimes a subject will come after the verb. When this is the case, agreement errors are trickier to identify. So, for example, separating the roads were a concrete median versus separating the roads was a concrete median. So, notice how in this case, the plural noun roads comes right before the helping verbs was and were, but it's not the subject. The subject of the verb is actually the singular noun median, which comes later. So we're used to having the noun, or like the subject of the sentence, come before the verb. Like in this case, Istanbul was founded, subject, and then verb. But in this case, the subject of the sentence is actually the concrete median. Not, you might think that, the roads is the subject. It's actually not. It's going to be the concrete median. That's the subject of the sentence. So because it's coming after the verb, in this case the verb is were and the subject is concrete median, you might get confused. You might think that the roads are the subject of the sentence. And if you think that the roads are the subjects of the sentence, then the roads are plural, right? So then you should use a plural verb. But again, that's not the case. The concrete median is the subject of the sentence, and since that's a singular noun, we need a singular verb, right? So we use the singular verb was in this sentence. So again, if you want to solve this issue, you can try flipping the subject in the verb. So instead of saying separating the roads was a concrete median, you can say a concrete median was separating the roads. Now the subject of the sentence is coming before the verb, right? A concrete median is coming before the verb, so it becomes clearer to us that this is a subject. That's one strategy you can try. Alright, tips. Place subject and verb side by side. Anytime you're not sure if a subject and verb agree, place them next to each other and see how they sound together. This tip helps cut through complex sentence structures and tends to make subject-verb agreement errors much more obvious. So this is a good tip. Let's say if you have an example like this where you have this extra information, you can just cut out this extra information. And again, remember that extra information in a sentence is usually injected through using two commas in the middle or two dashes or two parentheses. Okay, look out for prepositions. Prepositions like with, of, and from are often used to start phrases that describe the subject of a sentence. These phrases can cause confusion as the object of the prepositional phrase ends up closer to the verb and is often a noun with a different number. For example, the sound of the trumpets was deafening. The prepositional phrase of the trumpets may include a plural noun, but it describes the singular subject sound, so we need to use the singular verb was. So in other words, this is just saying that of the trumpets, this is not the subject. Trumpets is not the subject. The subject of the sentence is sound. And since the sound is singular, then our verb should also be singular. So don't get confused by that. And then this, plurals and the letter S. If you're a fluent speaker of English, you'll often be able to pair plural nouns with plural verbs based purely on instinct and sound. But if that doesn't work, you need to be able to identify singular and plural verbs. With nouns, plurals are usually formed by adding an S to the end of the word. So elephant to elephants. With verbs, the pattern is the opposite. Typically, we form a plural verb by removing an S. So instead of the elephant runs, uh, the plural of this becomes run, right? The elephants run. All right, so let's try this example. A Neapolitan pizza made with San Marzano tomatoes can blank considered more traditional than the one made with any other type of tomatoes. And we can see that we have different tenses of the same word or the same verb, right? So let's see this. A Neapolitan pizza made with San Marzano tomatoes. So notice how the subject of the sentence is a Neapolitan pizza, right? That's the subject of the sentence. Made with San Marzano tomatoes is actually describing the pizza, right? So you might think that, oh, the San Marzano tomatoes must be the subject. It's not. This is actually just describing the subject. The subject again is a Neapolitan pizza. So since the subject is singular, we're going to need a singular verb to pair with that. So a Neapolitan pizza is considered, right? That would make more sense. So notice how I can just cut out this extra information. A Neapolitan pizza, I'm going to get rid of this extra information. A Neapolitan pizza is considered, right? That makes sense, right? I'm not going to do a Neapolitan pizza are considered. That doesn't make sense. Or the other ones don't make sense. The only one that makes sense here for the singular pizza is. So that's what I'm going to use. And yeah, it says, notice how made with San Marzano tomatoes, that's an extra descriptive phrase that doesn't actually matter. So we don't need to, worry about this. The main subject in the sentence is the pizza. All right, let's look at this example. The sum of money one donates to registered nonprofit organizations blank a deduction that can be made from one's taxable income. So let's see. This one is a little bit trickier. The sum of money one donates to registered nonprofit organizations. So again, it looks like the subject of the sentence is the sum of money, right? And the sum of money, and again, this is like kind of extra information describing the subject, but the main subject of the sentence is the sum of money. So I'm just going to get rid of the extra information and focus on this subject, right? The sum of money blank a deduction. So would I say the sum of money represent a deduction? No, because that wouldn't make sense there, right? I could say, let's see, the sum of money represents a deduction. That makes more sense, right? And the sum of money are representing a deduction? No. The sum of money have represented a deduction? No. So the one that makes most sense here is represents. And we can see that the singular verb represents agrees in number with a singular subject sum. So you can see that sum is a singular subject and represents is going to be the singular verb in this case. Now remember how we were talking before about how verbs, usually when you're making them plural, you remove the S, right? So the elephant runs versus the elephants run, right? So what if I had a plural verb here, right? Let's say I don't know, all of their banks, something like that, right? In that case, I would probably remove, in that case, I would use this version of the verb, right? I would use all of their banks represent a deduction, right? Because this is plural. So I would move to the singular represent. But back to our example, we have the sum of money, this is singular, right? So then we use represents. That's the singular version of the verb. Okay, let's look at this example. Called embouchure, the shape of a skilled trumpet player, the shape of a skilled trumpet player's lips blank for playing a wide range of notes with clear tone and without muscle strain. So again, this is extra information, right? It's describing the subject of the sentence, but this is the main subject of the sentence. The shape of a skilled trumpet player's lips, right? And we can see that the shape, this is like the main subject. The shape and this part here, let me copy this. So again, this is extra information. It's not really relevant, or it is relevant, but it's extra information, right? And the shape here, this is going to be the main subject of the sentence. And of a skilled player's lips, again, this is describing the subject, right? So the shape of a skilled trumpet player's lips, the sentence doesn't really need that, right? It's helpful to have, but again, it's additional information that's describing the main subject, which is the shape. So I could eliminate that. I could also eliminate this, right? And now I have the shape blank for playing a wide range of notes. And we can see that this is a singular noun, right? So I'm going to be looking for a singular verb. So the shape blank for playing a wide range of notes. The shape allows for playing a wide range of notes. That makes sense. The shape are allowing. No, that doesn't make sense. This is plural. The shape allow, again, remember that verbs typically have an s on the end when they're singular, and they you remove the s when it's plural, right? So this allow is plural, right? It wouldn't make sense to say the shape allow for playing a wide range of notes. If we had a plural noun, so like let's say the shapes allow, that would make more sense, right? If this is like now a plural noun, so we'd have the plural verb allow. But in our case, we have the shape, so we're gonna do allows. That's the singular verb and singular noun. The shape allows. And again, have allowed, this is also plural, so our answer is going to be this one, allows. Alright, let's look at this next subject. Pronoun antecedent agreement. What is pronoun antecedent agreement? Pronoun pronoun antecedent agreement is a convention of standard English that requires a pronoun and antecedent to agree in person and number. So this is incorrect. Cranberries are both sour and bitter, so people rarely eat it unsweetened. Again, notice how this cranberries is plural, right? So we can't use this singular word it to describe it. So the correct version of the sentence is cranberries are both sour and bitter, so people rarely eat them unsweetened. Again, notice how them agrees with cranberries because both of these are plural. So them in this case is a pronoun that represents cranberries, right? So if cranberries is plural, then its pronoun has to be plural as well. The same logic must be applied to all pronouns and their antecedents. And also, in case you don't know what an antecedent is, it's the noun that a pronoun is standing in for. And the pronoun is a word that stands in for another noun, right? So, like in this case, if we look at this sentence, cranberries are both sour and bitter, so people rarely eat it unsweetened. This is a pronoun, right? It is a pronoun, and the noun that it's standing in for, the word that it's standing in for, is cranberries. So it here is representing cranberries. So it, the antecedent of it is cranberries because that's what it's representing, and the pronoun of cranberries is it because it is representing cranberries. Same thing with this case. Them is the pronoun in this case, and cranberries is the antecedent. So this is very similar to the last one. It just means that uh, the pronoun and antecedent have to agree in number. How to identify pronoun antecedent agreement? How to identify pronoun antecedent agreement questions? When approaching form, structure, and sense questions, it's important to identify which standard English conventions are being tested. You'll know to look for pronoun antecedent agreement errors if one choice uses a singular pronoun like it, while another choice uses a plural pronoun like they. A pronoun outside the blank refers to a noun contained within the choices. If you don't notice either of these features, then the question doesn't deal with pronoun antecedent agreement. Let's look at a question now. It's hard to live in Antarctica. The cold, dry environment provides the continent's soil-dwelling microbes few nutrients, little water, and almost no sunlight. In a 2017 study of these organisms, microbiologist Belinda Ferrari reported that blank able to survive on a diet of atmospheric gases found in the soil. So let's read the sentence again. Let's read this, and we can see that we have different pronouns here. So, and they have like different plurals, right? Some of them are singular, some of them are plural. So let's look at this again. It's hard to live in Antarctica. The cold, dry environment provides the continent's soil-dwelling microbes few nutrients, little water, and almost no sunlight. In a 2017 study of these organisms, microbiologists reported that blank able to survive on a diet of atmospheric gases. So we can see that the antecedent in this sentence is these organisms, right? This is whatever pronoun we have in the blank is going to be referring to these organisms. It's going to be standing in place of these organisms. We can see that this antecedent is plural, right? This noun is plural. So we're going to be looking for a plural um, a, a plural pronoun, right? So let's go back to our answer choices. It is no, because we can already tell that this is going to be incorrect because this is singular, right? And just to put a point on it, I can plug it in, right? If I read this in a sentence study, in a 2017 study of these organisms, microbiologist Ferrari reported that it is able to survive. No, because again, this is plural, this is singular, it doesn't make sense, right? This is, again, this is singular, either is, that doesn't really make sense either. Again, you can like plug these in, right? If we put either is, if you read that sentence to yourself, it doesn't really make sense, right? In a 2017 study of these organisms, microbiologist Belinda Ferrari reported that either is able. No, that doesn't make sense. The only plural here that makes sense is they are, right? So if we read this, in a 2017 study of these organisms, microbiologist Ferrari reported that they are able to survive on a diet. So that's gonna make the most sense, right? What can make pronoun antecedent agreement errors difficult to spot? In simple sentences, a connection between a pronoun and its antecedent is often very clear. However, as sentences become more complex, errors in pronoun antecedent agreement can become much more difficult to identify. So be cautious when you notice any of the following. Distance between the pronoun and antecedent. So notice how, again, this is very similar to subject-verb agreement. The further apart a pronoun and its antecedent are in a sentence, the harder agreement errors are to spot. Extra phrases and clauses interfere with our ability to work off in sync. Errors in these cases are less likely to just sound wrong, so if you notice a pronoun out way out on its own, track down its antecedent and check for agreement. So let's look at this example. The record player largely fell out of style in the 1980s and 90s, but there has since been a revival in their popularity. So it's difficult to tell in this sentence because there's a lot of extra information, right? The record player largely fell out of style in the 1980s and 90s, but there has since been a revival in their popularity. The antecedent of this pronoun there is going to be the record player, right? This is the antecedent. This is a noun that the pronoun is referring to, right? Notice how the record player, the is singular, right? This is one record player, or it's a singular tense, right? So this would be incorrect. It's not there because there is a plural pronoun, right? So we want a singular pronoun like it's. The record player largely fell out of style in the 1980s and 90s, but there has since been a revival in its popularity. This is singular, so it makes sense that it fits with the record player. Okay. Other cases that make it difficult to spot. Multiple nouns before the pronoun. When multiple nouns appear before a pronoun in a sentence, identifying the correct antecedent can be tricky. Errors in pronoun antecedent agreement will be difficult to identify in these cases, especially if some of the nouns are plural and others are singular. When you notice multiple nouns before a pronoun, take the time to identify the most logical antecedent. So let's look at this example. This is incorrect. The cougar, the largest of all North American cats, has lost most of their range in the eastern United States. So the correct version of the sentence is the cougar, the largest of all North American cats, has lost most of its range in the eastern United States. So the explanation is that even though cats is a plural noun close to the pronoun, it isn't a logical antecedent for the pronoun. The actual antecedent cougar is a singular noun and it requires a singular pronoun it. So if we take a look at this sentence, notice how, again, this is extra information that is, presented or injected into the sentence using two commas. Remember what I said last lesson, that extra information can be injected into a sentence usually using either two commas or two dashes like this, or two parentheses like this. But in all cases, it's extra information, and the sentence actually doesn't need it to be a sentence, right? So if I take the sentence, the cougar, the largest of all North American cats, has lost most of its range. I can actually eliminate this entire thing and just read the sentence like this. The cougar has lost most of its range, right? Now it's much more easier to identify. If I have there in this sentence, if I replace its with there, this is incorrect because there is a plural pronoun, right? The cougar has lost most of their range. That doesn't make sense, right? So again, I would have it, as that's the singular pronoun. Okay, other cases that make it difficult to identify the pronoun, when there's a pronoun before the antecedent. Antecedent literally means what comes before, but sometimes this relationship gets flipped. And when a pronoun comes before its antecedent, we're less likely to notice an agreement error. If you see a pronoun towards the beginning of the text, track down the noun it refers to and double check for agreement. So this is incorrect. While it may not be widely associated with long life, ocean clams have been known to live for over 500 years. So notice how it is the pronoun, the antecedent that it's referring to, or the noun that it's referring to, is ocean clams, right? Notice how ocean clams is plural, right? So we would be looking for a plural pronoun, but this is giving us a singular pronoun. So that's incorrect. We want a plural pronoun like they. While they may not be widely associated with long life, ocean clams have been known to live for over 500 years. Okay, tips. So first, find the antecedent. To recognize pronoun agreement errors, we must be able to identify the antecedent of the pronoun in question. And that's, again, the antecedent is just a noun that the pronoun refers to, alright? Other tips, plug in the antecedent. If you're not sure if you've identified the correct noun as the antecedent, try plugging it in where the pronoun goes. If the sentence still makes sense, you found the antecedent. So let's look at this example. The survival of the orangutan is threatened by the destruction of its habitat. So notice how this pronoun its is referring to the orangutan, right? So what you can do is you can actually replace its with the orangutan, right? Because its is just referring to the orangutan, so we should be able to replace its with the orangutan. So when you replace its with what it's referring to, right? Let me take this. So this is the noun that this pronoun is referring to. And what I can do is I can replace this pronoun here with the noun that it's referring to. So the survival of the orangutan is threatened by the destruction of the orangutan habitat. So that's what I can do to, check to see if this makes sense. We would have to replace this with the orangutan's habitat. So this tip is mainly for if you want to make sure that you've identified the correct noun as the antecedent. Okay. A note about gendered pronouns: the SAT won't ask you to choose between a gendered pronoun, so like he, she, and the non-gendered singular pronoun they when referring to a single person. When checking for a pronoun antecedent agreement, you'll only need to determine A, if the noun is singular or plural, and B, if the noun is a person or thing. So you won't have to worry about gender or anything. So let's look at these example problems. Before a jury trial begins, lawyers for each side interview potential jurors closely. Blank questions intended to reveal any biases. So you can see that we have a bunch of, or all these verbs are pretty much the same, right? Except for this one, right? but we can see that the pronouns in these cases are all different, right? So this case we have him or her, this case we have them, this case we have it, this case we have him or her, right? So let's look at this sentence again, right? Before a jury trial begins, lawyers for each side interview potential jurors closely. So this is the noun that whatever pronoun we have is going to be referring to, right? So potential jurors is a noun, and notice how potential jurors is a plural noun, right? So we're going to be looking for a plural pronoun. And one other thing is that the gender of these potential jurors is not specified, right? So we're going to be using some sort of neutral pronoun. And also typically you won't like it said before, you won't really be asked to deal with gender when you're finding the pronouns, right? So we can probably eliminate asking him or her, or to ask him or her, even though they don't make sense on their own. We can already eliminate them just because they're dealing with like gender, and we're probably not going to have to deal with that on the SAT. So we can narrow this down to asking them or asking it. Now asking it doesn't make much sense, right? Because potential jurors is plural, right? So if I say lawyers for each side interview potential jurors closely, asking it questions, no, that doesn't make sense. It would make more sense to say asking them questions, right? Because this way we're accounting for the plural and potential jurors, and also asking them is like a gender neutral pronoun, so we won't run into any issues there. So asking them would be the correct answer. Okay, let's look at this question. Thanks to blank long legs, giraffes are very fast, running as quickly as 35 miles per hour in short bursts. So we can notice that in this question, giraffes is the antecedent, right? Notice how it's actually coming after the pronoun, right? But that's fine because we can identify the antecedent at least, right? And in this case, giraffes is really the only potential antecedent that there could be, right? That's the only one that it would make sense to be, so that's going to be the antecedent, right? So thanks to blank long legs, giraffes are very fast. So notice how giraffes is a plural noun, right? So we're going to be looking for a plural pronoun. So it's is probably not going to be it because it's this is a singular pronoun, right? One's that's also singular, right? His or her again. We're probably not going to be dealing with gender, and also this is singular anyway, so there is the one that makes sense, right? It's plural, and if you plug it in right, thanks to their long legs, that makes sense, right? So that's going to be the correct answer. Alright, so those were lessons 1 and 2 of Unit 11.